The Russian phrase "чудовище следило из мрака" translates to "the monster was watching from the darkness." Here's a breakdown of the words. Чудовище, monster, creature. Следило was watching, was observing, past tense, neutral gender. Из, from, out of. Mraka, the darkness, the gloom, genitive case of mrak. It has a dark. The Russian phrase "как вооруженные люди с горящими факелами входят в недра горы" translates to like armed men with burning torches entering the depths of the mountain. Here's a breakdown. Как like as. Вооруженные люди, armed people, armed men. С горящими факелами, with burning torches. Входят, enter, are entering. В недра горы, into the depths, interior of the mountain. It's a vivid, almost cinematic image. The Russian phrase "когда они приблизились" means when they approached in English. Breaking it down, когда, when, они, they, приблизились, approached or came closer, past tense plural. So it's the beginning of a sentence that sets up a past action. For example, open quote. Когда они приблизились, он заметил их. When they approached, he noticed them. The Russian phrase "оно попятилось" means it backed away or it stepped back. Let's break it down. Оно, it, попятилось, past tense, reflexive form of пятиться, meaning to back away, to move backward, or to retreat while facing forward. So оно попятилось literally means it backed off, it started to retreat. It's often used when describing an animal or a person moving backward out of fear, surprise, or hesitation. For example, open quote, услышав громкий звук, оно попятилось. Hearing the loud noise, it backed away. Close quote. The phrase "пряча свою громадную тушу от света" is in Russian and can be translated roughly as hiding its enormous body from the light. Breaking it down, пряча, hiding, present participle from the verb прятать, свою, its or one's own, feminine accusative form, громадную тушу, enormous body, or huge carcass. Tusha literally means body, often of an animal or something large. От света, from the light. So the image is of something very large trying to stay out of view, avoiding light. It has a slightly poetic or dramatic tone, as if describing. The Russian phrase "люди прошли в пещеру" translates to "the people went into the cave" in English. Breaking it down word by word, люди equals people, прошли went, past tense plural. В equals into, in. Пещеру equals cave, accusative case because it's the object of went into. It's a simple past tense sentence describing people entering a cave. If you want, I can also explain. The phrase "вырубленную в гранитной скале" is Russian and literally translates to carved into granite rock or hewn from granite rock. Breaking it down, вырубленную, past passive participle of вырубить, meaning carved out or chiseled. Вив, in or into. Гранитной скале, granite rock. Гранитная скала. So it describes something that has been physically carved or cut into solid granite. The phrase "и вдели факелы в ржавые кольца на стенах" is Russian and can be translated literally as, and they inserted the torches into the rusty rings on the walls. Breaking it down. И and, вдели, past tense of вдеть, meaning to insert or to thread into, факелы torches, в ржавые кольца into the rusty rings, на стенах on the walls. So the sentence describes someone putting torches into old rusty wall rings. The Russian sentence. В середине отряда из 20 человек шел некто в бронзовых доспехах translates to English as, in the middle of a squad of 20 people, there was someone in bronze armor. Breaking it down, в середине, in the middle, отряда из 20 человек of a squad of 20 people. Шел was walking, went. Некто в бронзовых доспехах, someone in bronze armor. It describes someone wearing bronze armor walking in the middle of a group of 20 people. If you want, I can. The phrase «которые при свете факелов сами горели» is Russian. Literally, it translates to which, in the light of torches, burned by themselves, or which burned on their own in the torchlight. Breaking it down, «которые», which, referring to some objects mentioned earlier, при свете факелов, in the light of torches, сами горели, burned by themselves, burned on their own. So it's describing something, like candles, torches, or magical flames, that seem to burn independently when lit in the torchlight. Context could make it slightly more poetic. The Russian phrase как пламя literally translates to like a flame in English. Как orzh. Plamya, whistle, flame. It's often used metaphorically to describe something intense, bright, passionate, or fleeting. For example, feelings, emotions, or energy. For instance, ее глаза горели как пламя. Her eyes burned like a flame. Страсть была как пламя. The passion was like a flame. If you want, I can explain the subtle emotional nuances of using. The phrase «человек в латах снял свой крылатый шлем» is Russian and literally translates to «the man in armor took off his winged helmet». Breaking it down, «человек» was man or person, в латах, in armor. Lat equals armor equals plural in the context of wearing it. Снял, took off. Свой equals his, or own. Крылатый шлем, winged helmet. Крылатый equals winged, шlem's helmet. Contextually, this evokes an image of a knight or warrior removing his distinctive helmet, possibly signaling peace, humility, or the end of a battle. The Russian sentence, «И двое оруженосцев поставили перед ним деревянный каркас», translates to English as, and two squires or attendants placed a wooden frame in front of him. Двое оруженосцев, two squires, or two attendants, literally two people carrying weapons, but in historical or literary context, it often refers to attendants of a knight or noble. Поставили, place a setup. Перед ним, in front of him. Деревянный каркас, wooden frame, could refer to a literal frame or a structure used for some purpose. If you want, I can also explain the possible context or imagery this sentence evokes. The Russian sentence «Воин надел шлем на его верхушку и расстегнул панцирь» translates literally to English as «The warrior put the helmet on its top and unfastened the armor». Breaking it down, «Воин» was warrior, «надел шлем» put on the helmet, «на его верхушку» on its top, literally on its peak top. И расстегнул панцирь and unfastened the armor. Панцирь usually refers to body armor, like a cuirass or breastplate. The sentence describes a warrior putting on a helmet and loosening or unfastening their armor. If you want, I can. The phrase «достигший пожилого возраста» is Russian and literally translates to having reached old age, or an elderly person. Достигший, having reached, or who has attained. Пожилого возраста, of advanced elderly age. So in context, it usually refers to someone who is elderly or senior. If you want, I can also explain the. The Russian phrase «он был еще крепок» translates literally to he was still strong, or he was still sturdy in English. Он he, был was, еще, still yet. Крепок, strong, robust, sturdy, resilient. So the phrase implies that despite possible hardships, age, or challenges, he remains strong or resilient. Context can slightly adjust the nuance, like physical strength, health, or even mental fortitude. If you want, I can give a few natural ways to say. The sentence «но волосы уже редели и глаза щурились от мигающего света» is Russian. A natural translation into English would be, but the hair was already thinning, and the eyes squinted from the flashing light. Breaking it down, No but, волосы уже редели, the hair was already thinning. Волосы hair уже already, редели were thinning. И глаза щурились, and the eyes squinted. От мигающего света, from the flashing light. От equal from, мигающий, flickering, света, light. The sentence paints a visual image likely describing someone getting older or affected by harsh lighting. If you want, I can also explain the tone and The Russian sentence "Он передал панцирь оруженосцу" translates literally to "He handed the armor to the squire." Breaking it down, "Он" he, передал equals handed over, gave. Панцирь equals armor, specifically a breastplate or protective gear, оруженосцу to the squire, the person who assists a knight, carrying weapons and armor. So the sentence describes someone giving their armor to a squire, likely before a battle or a ceremony. If you want, I can also explain the phrase "который пристроил его на каркас и закрепил застежки" can be translated from Russian to English as "who attached it to the frame and fastened the clasps." Breaking it down, "который" who or which, referring to a person or object mentioned earlier. "Пристроил его на каркас" attached it to the frame, literally, arranged it onto the frame, и закрепил застежки and fastened the clasps, secured the fasteners. So it describes someone who mounted or fixed something onto a structure and then secured it with fasteners. If you want, I can also explain the nuance of пристроил, which can sound slightly informal or colloquial. Do you want me to? The Russian phrase "Вы уверены в своем решении, мой господин" translates to English as "Are you sure about your decision, my lord?" or "Are you certain about your decision, my lord?" Breaking it down, "Вы" formal you, "Уверены" are you sure, в своем решении about your decision. "Мой господин" my lord, a formal or respectful address. It's a polite and somewhat old-fashioned or dramatic way of asking someone if they're certain about a choice. If you want The phrase "Спросил старец в синих одеждах" is Russian and literally translates to "an old man in blue clothes asked" or "the elder in blue garments asked." Breaking it down, "Спросил" asked, past tense masculine. Старец, old man or elder, often with a connotation of wisdom or spiritual authority. В синих одеждах in blue clothes, literally in blue garments. So, the full phrase would be used in a narrative to describe that a wise or elderly man wearing blue clothes asked something. If you want, I can also explain the nuance of the word starets in Russian literature and folklore. The Russian phrase «Насколько вообще можно быть в чем-то уверенным» can be translated into English as «How certain can one be about anything at all?» Or more loosely, «To what extent is it even possible to be sure of anything?» Breaking it down, «Насколько» how much, to what extent, вообще in general, at all. Можно быть one can be, is it possible to be, в чем-то in something, about something. Уверенным certain, sure. The phrase expresses philosophical doubt or skepticism, questioning whether absolute certainty in anything is truly possible. The Russian sentence «Вот уже год, как этот сон снится мне, и я верю в него» translates to English as «This dream has been appearing to me for a year now, and I believe in it». A more literal breakdown «Вот уже год, it's already been a year, как этот сон снится мне, since this dream has been appearing to me, since I have been dreaming this dream, и я верю в него, and I believe in it». It expresses a sense of a recurring dream that has lasted a year and the speaker's faith or belief in its meaning. If you want, I can also give a more poetic natural English version that keeps the feeling of the original. The Russian sentence «Но эти доспехи очень много значат для Дренаев» translates to English as «But these armor pieces mean a lot to the Drenai». No, but эти доспехи, these armor pieces. Очень много значит mean a lot, or are very important. Для Дренаев, for the Draenei. Draenei are a fictional race in World of Warcraft. It's essentially saying that, for the Draenei, these armor pieces are very significant. If you want, I can also explain why znachat is used in the Russian sentence «Потому-то я и принес их сюда» can be translated to English as «That's exactly why I brought them here», or «That's why I brought them here». Потому-то, that's why, for that reason, with an emphasis. Я и принес, I brought. The e here emphasizes the action, like indeed brought. Их сюда, them here. The sentence emphasizes that the reason for bringing them here is exactly what was just mentioned or implied. If you want, the Russian phrase «Быть может, еще не поздно передумать» translates to «Maybe it's not too late to change your mind», or more literally, «Perhaps it's not too late to rethink». «Быть может», maybe, perhaps, «еще не поздно», not too late yet. «Передумать», to change one's mind, to rethink. It's a gentle or cautious way of asking someone if they want to reconsider a decision. If you want, I can. The Russian sentence «Nialad molod и вполне мог бы подождать года два» translates to English as Nialad is young and could easily wait for a couple of years. Breaking it down, Nialad molod, Nialad is young, и вполне мог бы подождать and could quite well wait, and could easily wait. Года два, 2 years, a couple of years. It implies that the person named Nialad is young enough that waiting for 2 years wouldn't be a problem for him. If you want, I can. The Russian phrase «Вы еще полный сил, господин мой» translates to English as «You are still full of strength, my lord», or «You still have plenty of energy, my lord». Breaking it down. «Вы» formal you, «Еще» still, полный сил, full of strength, power, energy. Господин мой, my lord, or polite, somewhat old-fashioned or formal. It's a respectful and somewhat formal way of acknowledging someone's vitality or energy. If you want, the Russian phrase «Зрение изменяет мне» literally translates to «My vision is deceiving me», or «My eyesight is failing me». Зрение, eyesight, vision. Изменяет, deceives, betrays, fails. Мне, to me, for me. So it expresses a feeling that what you see isn't trustworthy, like your eyes are playing tricks on you. If you want, the Russian sentence «Скоро я ослепну» translates to «Soon I will go blind», or «I will become blind soon». Скоро, soon. Я, I ослепну. Will go blind, will become blind. Future tense of the verb ослепнуть. So the sense expresses that the speaker expects to lose their sight in the near future. If you The phrase "Pristala li это королю" is Russian and literally translates to "Does this befit the king?" or "Is this fitting for a king?" Pristala befits, suits, or is appropriate for. Li, a particle that turns the sentence into a question, like whether or is it. Это this. Королю, dative case of король, king, meaning for the king. So it's asking whether some action, behavior, or situation is suitable for a king, often implying a judgment of dignity or appropriateness. If you want, I can. The phrase "прославленному своим воинским мастерством" is Russian and can be translated into English as renowned, famed for his/her martial skill, or celebrated for his/her military mastery. Breaking it down, прославленному, renowned, famed, celebrated, dative case, referring to someone being described. Своим, by his/her own, possessive. Воинским мастерством, military martial skill, or warrior mastery. So the whole phrase is used to praise someone who has become famous because of their combat or military abilities. If you want, the Russian phrase "Я не хочу лишиться вас" translates to "I don't want to lose you" in English. Я equals I, не хочу, don't want. Лишиться, to lose, in the sense of losing someone emotionally or losing contact. Вас, you, formal or plural. So it's a heartfelt way to express that someone doesn't want to be separated from another person. If you want, I can also explain. The Russian phrase "Мне не подобает так говорить, но ваш сын" translates roughly to "It is not proper for me to say this, but your son." Мне не подобает так говорить. It is not appropriate, proper for me to say this. Но ваш сын, but your son. It's typically the beginning of a sentence where someone is about to say something potentially sensitive, critical, or uncomfortable about the son. The speaker is being polite or cautious by prefacing it with a disclaimer. The Russian phrase "Я знаю все его слабости" translates to "I know all his weaknesses" in English. I, знаю equal know, все, all, его, his, слабости, weaknesses. It's a straightforward statement implying the speaker is aware of all the vulnerabilities or flaws of someone, typically in a personal or strategic context. The phrase "отрезал король" is Russian and literally translates to "the king cut off" or "cut off by the king" in English. The exact meaning depends on context. Literally, it could refer to a king physically cutting something, like a ribbon, branch, or even in historical figurative texts, a head. Figuratively, in idiomatic or literary use, it might mean the king made a decisive action or judgment, often harsh or final. If you give me the sentence or context, the Russian phrase "И знаю, что его ждет" translates to "and I know what awaits him," or "and I know what he is in for." Breaking it down, equals and, знаю, I know, что, that, what, accusative case of he, ждет, awaits or is waiting for. The context usually implies that the speaker is aware of the outcome or situation that the person will face. The Russian phrase "близится конец всему" translates to "the end is approaching for everything," or more naturally in English, "the end of everything is near." Близится is approaching, is near, конец end, всему to everything, of everything. It has a dramatic, ominous tone, often used in literature or speech to convey impending doom or a sense of finality. If you The Russian phrase "за что мы боролись" literally translates to "what we fought for" or "what we struggled for." За for, что, what. Мы, we, боролись, fought, struggled, past tense. It's usually used in a reflective or rhetorical sense, often questioning whether the effort or struggle was worth it. For example, after facing disappointment, someone might say it to express frustration or irony about the outcome. The Russian phrase "это случится не теперь" literally translates to "this will happen not now." A smoother, more natural English rendering would be "this won't happen now." It's not going to happen now. It implies that something is expected to happen, but not at the present moment. If The phrase "и не через 5 лет" is Russian and literally translates to "and not in 5 years." Contextually, it's often used to emphasize that something will happen sooner than 5 years or won't take as long as 5 years. For example, "это случится быстро и не через 5 лет." It will happen quickly and not in 5 years. The tone can vary depending on context. It could be reassuring, sarcastic, or emphasizing impatience. If you want, the phrase "no kровавые дни грядут" is Russian and translates to "but bloody days are coming" or "but days of blood are approaching." No but, kровавые, bludjective, dni, days. Грядут, are coming, are approaching, literary or somewhat formal. The phrase "и у Дрянаев должна остаться надежда" is in Russian, word by word, "и" and equals at, for, belongs to, contextually, should remain with. Дрянаевly, a plural form of a name or a fictional group called Dranaei, from Warcraft, for example. Должна остаться must remain, should stay. Надежда equals hope. So a natural translation would be, and the Dranaei must still have hope, or, and hope must remain for the Dranaei. It sounds The Russian phrase "вот этой надеждой и станут доспехи" can be translated literally as "this hope itself will become armor." Breaking it down, "вот этой надеждой" with this hope or this hope itself, и станут will become or will serve as dоспехи, armor, usually in a literal sense, but can also be metaphorical like protection or defense. So the phrase is metaphorical, suggesting that the Russian phrase "но ведь они не волшебные" translates to "but after all, they are not magical," or more naturally in English, "but they aren't magical, you know." Breaking it down, "no," but, ведь, a particle that adds emphasis like after all or you know, они, they, не волшебные, not magical. The tone suggests a reminder or clarification, like someone pointing out that these things don't have magical powers. If you The word "государь" is Russian and historically has a few nuanced meanings. 1. Sovereign, ruler, monarch. In Old Russian and formal contexts, it referred to a king, czar, or someone who holds supreme authority over a state. For example, "Государь всея Руси" meant sovereign of all Russia. 2. Formal address. It could also be used as a The Russian phrase "все волшебство заключалось в вас" translates to "all the magic was within you" or "all the magic resided in you." Все волшебство, all the magic заключалось was contained, resided, lay. Вас, in you. It's a poetic or inspirational expression, implying that the source of wonder, power, or magic wasn't external. It was inside the person all along. If you want, I can also explain a slightly more. The phrase "a доспехи", просто металл, is Russian. Literally translated, it means and armor is just metal. It carries a somewhat philosophical or the Russian phrase "который вы носили на себе" translates literally to "which you were wearing on yourself." Breaking it down, "который" which, that, referring to something previously mentioned. Вы, you, formal or plural. Носили, wore, have worn, past tense of to wear. На себе, on yourself, on one's own body. So in context, it usually refers to clothing, jewelry, or any item someone had on their body. For example, пожалуйста, принесите куртку, которую вы носили на себе вчера. Please bring the jacket that you were wearing yesterday. If you want, I can explain the nuance of на себе in Russian. The phrase «они могли с равным успехом быть серебряными» is Russian and translates literally to, open quote, they could just as well be silver, close quote. In context, the phrase «золотыми или кожаными» is Russian and literally translates to «золотыми», golden, or made of gold, кожаными, leather, or made of leather, или, or. So the whole phrase means golden or leather. Context. The phrase «страну Дренаев создал король Ариен» is in Russian. Literally, it translates to «the country of the Draenei was created by King Orion». Here's a breakdown. Stranu, country or land, accusative case of strana. Drenaev, of the Draenei, genitive plural of Draenei. Sozdal, created, past tense masculine. Karol, king. Orion, a proper name. Contextually, it seems like a statement from a fantasy or game universe, probably Warcraft. The Russian phrase «А теперь он покидает нас» translates to «and now he is leaving us», or «and now he leaves us». А теперь, and now, он, he, покидает, is leaving. Leaves, нас, us. The tone is somewhat solid. The phrase «король, оставшийся теперь в буром камзоле оленьей кожи» is Russian and translates literally to «the king, now left in a brown deerskin doublet». Breaking it down. Король, king. Оставшийся теперь, now remaining, left now. В буром камзоле, in a brown doublet, a type of snug-fitting jacket. Оленьей кожи, made of deerskin. So the image it evokes is of a king who has been stripped of his usual royal attire or grand. The phrase «положил руки на плечи сановника» literally translates from Russian as «put hands on the shoulders of a dignitary official». However, in Russian, the meaning can depend heavily on context. A few